What's up, guys? Welcome back to FishOfHex. My name is Travis. Well, today's video is not the one I originally had planned for uploading, but I've been running into some serious issues with the 300 over the last few days, and I figured I'd go ahead and share the experience with you. That way you can learn from my mistakes, because believe it or not, it could have all been prevented if I just paid attention to my apex. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So you guys have heard me talk about how important alkalinity is for an SPS reef tank and how it is the most important water parameter when it comes to keeping Acropora alive. Now, not only does it need to be in the appropriate range, but it needs to stay stable with minimal fluctuations. Now, I'll tell you right now, over the last week, I ended up getting a 3-point drop in DKH in just 48 hours on this tank. It went from 8.5 to 5.6 in just 48 hours. Now, I didn't even realize anything was wrong because there wasn't any ill effects. The tank looked fine. The polyp extension, it wasn't as great as it usually is, but I thought it was just a flow thing. It's just something that comes and goes over time. And I actually caught it when I was trying out a new bottle of Regent for my Hannah checker, and I'll talk about that whole process here in a second. So you guys are probably wondering what the heck happened to the tank that would cause such a drastic drop in alkalinity in such a short period of time. Now, it all comes down to the calcium reactor, the one main piece of equipment that supplies the calcium and alkalinity to this tank and essentially keeps it alive. Now, it's not the reactor itself, it's actually the CO2 regulator, or the carbon doser, the $300 carbon doser that is used to regulate the CO2 within the reactor, which then allows the media to break down and supply calcium and alkalinity to the tank. So sometime on the 9th, I must have bumped the CO2 regulator. I don't know what I was doing over there. I don't even remember being next to the tank, but I must have pulled the cord out just a little bit. Not even enough to notice it or completely pull it out of the regulator, but enough to stop the flow of power. So when the apex turned it on, it didn't get the power. It didn't open up the CO2 canister, and it didn't put any CO2 in the reactor. Basically what happened is, since it wasn't adding CO2, the pH in the reactor went up, and it was just pouring in regular water through media. It wasn't anything that was full of calcium alkalinity like it usually does when the pH is in the correct range. All right, so here's a quick look at the pH fluctuations in the calcium reactor, and you can see that I must have bumped it sometime around 4 o'clock, 4:30 on the 9th. Again, I don't even remember even being around the tank then, and as you can see, the pH just slowly went up within the reactor and basically made it useless, where it wasn't putting out any calcium or alkalinity into the tank. And then I noticed it around 7 p.m., 8 o'clock on the 11th, and that's when I plugged it back in all the way, and then everything went back to normal. Now, I'll tell you guys right off the bat that this could have all been prevented if I enabled the alarms within my apex. Now, I have the programming there, and I'll show you guys here in a second. I just never turned them back on because I'm always doing stuff here in the fish room, and sometimes the alarms just annoy me, so I keep them off. Now, that was definitely a mistake that I made, and they're going to be fixed from this point forward. But in those alarms, I have it set so if the pH within the calcium reactor gets to 7, I'm going to be notified via a text message or an alarm here, and you can see that it would have only been off for about an hour before I got the notification and could have solved the problem. And you guys can look here for the alarms that, again, if it gets above 7, it's going to let me know. If it gets below 6.6, it's going to let me know. And if the temperature gets above 80.5 on the 300, I'm going to get an alarm. And if my Avast Marine collection bin gets full, it's also going to let me know. And yeah, so basically my fault 100%. One, because I wasn't paying attention to my numbers here over 48 hours. I wasn't even looking at the graphs or anything that was here. I would have noticed it if I looked at it more carefully. And two, I didn't keep my alarms on, which could have prevented the whole problem altogether. So what am I going to do now to rectify the situation and not kill off my Acropora? Well, sad to say that at least one of the acros is starting the STN, but the good news is it's one that's already STN before. It stopped for a while and then it kicked back up, which was one of those things I was looking at over the 48 hours going, oh, I guess it started to STN again. I wonder what's going on. And it didn't even click to just go ahead and look at the numbers and pay attention to the tank. That just goes to show how distracted I get. But at this point, I have the calcium reactor back on. It does need to be topped off with media, but I'm going to wait to do that until I get things a little bit more stable, because I don't want to be adding more media to that reactor and then having it just dose more calcium alkalinity and cause a spike. Now, of course, I can dial down the effluent, which I've already done since I've turned it back on. So since I rectified the situation, I believe on the 11th, it's gone from the 5.6 to 7 DKH. And that's a pretty good jump for me over the last 2 days. Now, what I'm going to do is keep doing that over the next week or so and finally get back to 8.5 or 9 DKH. And I say 8.5 or 9 because I've been dealing with Hannah Checker Regent. 2 batches that I have say 8.5, and then when I test with another batch, and it's actually 2 bottles of the same batch, I went and ordered another one and they just gave me the same damn batch. But I end up getting a 9.5. I'm basically getting a 0.5 difference in the 2 batches. So I'm just going to keep the tank at 8.5 because then it's either at 8.5 or it's at 9. And I'm happy with either one of those numbers. I don't like getting up to 9.5 or 10 or anything like that. So I'll just keep it at 8.5 for one, and the other one will just say 9. So I'm not really sure what that's about. I double checked with Hannah and they said that there was no complaints about the batch. And yeah, so it is what it is. I'm not too worried about it. But I will say when I tested the new bottle of Regent when it came in, and that's pretty much what sparked all this, is I was like, oh, let's test this new bottle of Regent and see what's going on with the tank. It actually said 5.6. I was like, oh, shit, what's going on? So I went ahead and I triple checked that, said 5.6. I also checked the frag system. It gave me a normal 8.0. So I was like, okay, there's something going on here. So I went even farther. I changed the batteries in the Hannah Checker, and I also brought out my Red Sea test kit. And I talked about this in the beginner guide, is always keep multiple test kits around so you can deal with problems like this. So I went ahead and I tested with the Red Sea, and sure enough, it said 5.6. And then I double checked with another Hannah Checker Regent bottle, and of course it was still a low number, again, 0.5 point off, but either way it was still low, and I was like, yep, there's definitely something going on here. So I started going through my checklist of what it could be, check the equipment, see what's plugged in, and as soon as I hit the plug on the carbon doser, it started blinking red. I was like, yep, that was the problem. And then I actually went ahead and super glued that damn plug in there because that's never happening again. You would think for $300 there would be a plug that wouldn't easily pop out. So it is what it is. It's one of those things that we're going to learn from, or I'm going to learn from, and you guys can learn from my mistake, is always double check your equipment and keep your damn Apex alarms on if you're using them, because they will save your tank, believe it or not. But overall, I'm not too upset with the situation. I'm glad I caught it earlier. If I was to go another couple days, the tank would have completely died. Hands down, would have been done, because the corals pull out so much over a 24-hour period that if it went even another 12 hours, I think that I would have started having some RTN or STN. And for those of you guys that wonder what that is, it's rapid tissue necrosis and slow tissue necrosis. It's basically the end of your acropora, and it definitely would have happened within 12 or another 24 hours, hands down. Well, guys, that's about it for the video. I don't want to drag it out any longer than it has to be. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you learned from my mistakes. And I'll tell you right now, I talked about this in the video on Wednesday. Sometimes we need to make mistakes. We need to get kicked in the balls before we can realize what we're doing wrong and progress. Now, I've been telling myself for a while now that I just need to fix the alarms, turn them back on. And if I did that earlier on, this would have never been a problem. Now, I am thankful because it could have been a lot worse. Like I said, if it went another 12 or 24 hours, I could have lost the entire tank. And at that point, I probably would have just had to blame it on the salt or something like that. But it didn't, so thankfully everything is good to go and the tank is coming back to normal without any really negative effects on the system. So with that said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys Monday. Peace.